On the 13th of January 2006, in the city of Acasco, which is part of the Argentinian capital, Buenos Aires, an armed robbery took place at the largest bank in Argentina. The gang broke into the bank and held the employees and reviewers hostage. A quarter of an hour later, they felt that they had made a mistake and had to flee. One of them came out with a hostage, to be surprised by the number of police officers who were surrounding the place. He had no choice but to go back inside the bank. He was waiting for his doomed fate with his friends. Of course, you believed this and thought it was a coincidence. But let me tell you that everything was planned. And just like the professor in the Cassidy Papel series was accountable for everything, the leader here was running the smartest robbery operation in history. The operation they later called the Century Robbery. For those who are seeing me for the first time, I am Abu Alyusha, and I talk about everything strange and mysterious on the planet Earth. But today, I will tell you about the Century Robbery, which is considered the smartest robbery operation in human history, just like the Cassidy Papel series. Every detail in this story, no matter how small it is calculated and studied with great accuracy. And of course, the plan could have been successful, but the fate of the gang and what happened to them was never expected. Hello guys, how are you? I do not know why the amount of messages and amazing messages from you, all of you ask me for this story. So if you want, we will do it. Do not forget to like, and those who are seeing me for the first time, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. The story began on May 15th, 2005. In this special date, Fernando Araujo went to his psychiatrist. He told him that he was going to do something that would give him vitality and passion for his life. The doctor asked him, "What is this thing you want to do?" He told him, "After I am 43 years old, maybe the only thing that will make me feel that I am still young and that I can do anything I want is to steal a bank." Of course, the doctor laughed and told him that this idea is impossible. He said, "No, it is not impossible, and I have been planning to steal a bank for a while." Of course, the discussion between them was long, and they did not reach a solution. But what you need to know is that Araujo was not lying, and he really intended to steal a bank. And the doctor, for the last moment, did not believe him. He saw that Araujo was desperate and full of life, and he was talking nonsense. The special thing about Araujo is that he was a very smart person. He used to work as a counterfeiter, and at the same time, he was a theater actor. When Araujo decided to steal a bank, he left everything and took time to plan the mission. The beginning was that every day Araujo would go out on his motorcycle and he would go around the streets of the Argentinian city of Acasco. The most noteworthy bank was Banco Rio. The bank was big and very famous. 80% of Argentinians put their money in this bank. Of course, the bank had an additional feature for customers, which is the depository, in which you can put anything you want: gold, jewelry, diamonds, money, anything you want. Here, Araujo moved to the second step, which is to determine the best way to steal this bank. Araujo had two ways. The first way is to make an armed attack and enter the bank and steal the employees' books. In other words, the story is not worth it. In addition, escaping from the bank will not be easy at all, because within minutes, the police will have filled the place. Therefore, the risk ratio is very high in this way, and the return is weak. The second way is to enter the bank at night and reach the depository and steal everything from it. Of course, this method has a very big return, and of course, it is the target of any thief in this world. But how can he reach the depository so easily? And if he dug a hole and managed to reach the depository, the surveillance cameras filled the place completely. And these cameras are directly connected to the city police. That is, as soon as the camera is touched, the alarm rings immediately. And above that, there are thermal sensors that detect any movement inside the depository and around it. That is, it is impossible. But despite all this, the man did not give up. He started thinking of a way to get into the bank and steal the depository without being discovered. The first thing he thought of was to dig a hole under the bank. A hole to reach the depository, and as soon as he enters, steal everything in it, and then run away from the same hole. But digging a hole like the one he thought of is impossible. Equipment and work take months, and of course, it will be discovered. He thought of renting a warehouse, or a shop, or a house, or a land near the bank, and that he would dig a hole in the real estate land that he would find next to the bank, and from there continue to make a hole between him and the bank's vault and steal everything from it. But he discovered that a matter like this would cost him an astronomical number, and that he would need to dig a hole 220 meters long, 220 meters to reach the vault. What's the solution? The solution appeared by chance. His brother had a real estate broker, and he wanted to see a house near the bank. He rode his motorcycle and went to see the house. On the way, he noticed that the road that leads to the bank and that passes right next to the bank contains a large number of manhole covers. Note that the distance between the manhole covers is only 10 meters. This means that the public bank passes right in front of the bank. That is, instead of digging a long hole from place to place, he can enter the bank through the lanes. As he continued along the road and followed all the paths, he was surprised to see that the sewer ended in a large square opening. Its height exceeds 2.5 meters. Under the hole, there is a large pool of water. That is, there is no need to look for real estate, and there is no need to dig a hole. The hole is already there. All he had to do was go inside the bank and see the distance between the bank and the sewer tunnel. Of course, he noticed that the hole was only 160 meters away from the bank. That is, he walked inside this hole for only 2 minutes, leaving him under the bank. And indeed, he went inside the hole and checked it completely, and said, "This is what I am looking for." He sat at home for 35 days. He was planning the way to enter the bank, and when his plans were ready, he moved on to the second stage, which is to have a team to help him with the plan and work with him because he alone would not succeed in the robbery operation. Among the people who were nominated for this mission was his friend Sebastian Polster. Sebastian works as an electronic and mechanical engineer, a person far from theft or such operations. But according to Polster's point of view, this is a very good thing because he does not want to be the first partner in this robbery of a criminal. In addition, Sebastian specializes in a very important thing, which is a general hatred of banks and Bank Bancorio in particular. The reason is that his father and his family lost all their money when the largest bank in Argentina went bankrupt. And when they raised money again and put it in Bank Bancorio, the bank booked their money and sold their house because they failed to pay the loan. In other words, the man came to take revenge on the bank who deprived him of his money. The first thing Araujo and Sebastian did was to agree to change their names. They agreed to call each other by nicknames to get used to the nickname. They told him to get used to these names until the team grew up. Araujo became the leader's name, and Sebastian became the engineer's name. Keep these names because everything after that happened by nicknames. The important thing is that the leader and the engineer went to the bank's website. They went down to the public bank and studied its area and how far it was from the bank. They kept working on this subject for a week. After that, the engineer went to the bank and told them that he had 6 kilos of gold and wanted to hide it with them. Of course, the employee went down to the safe and let him see it. He opened the door and showed him the depository safes. He asked him to open one of the safes in front of him to see how safe it was. Everything he was doing, he was filming with a hidden camera inside the vaults. After this visit, the engineer came back and watched the videos with the leader and thought together how they wanted to overcome every step by step. The most important problem they faced was that they needed a lot of financial support. They wanted to buy equipment to open the big safe and all the safes inside it. Here, the leader contacted the third person in the gang, nicknamed the Doctor. To this day, no one knows his name or identity because he is an educated person and has a scientific social status. But at the same time, he knows a lot of criminals, and he has a lot of suspicious deeds. Of course, the Doctor was in charge of forming the team. He was the one who included the people who had an active role in the gang. The first person's name was Pito Latorre, and his nickname was the Sponsor. The Sponsor was a very smart person, a weak player who was able to steal anyone without realizing it. He has a great ability to negotiate and convince, and his criminal record is full. He has extensive experience with weapons, and when they told him about the plan, he immediately agreed. They told him that he had a big truck that he would sell to finance this operation. Here, they had two choices. One was to be responsible for the digging and the dangerous skills, and the other was to drive the car in which they would escape. The doctor suggested the name of Luis Silanes. Luis was a member of one of the most famous Argentine gangs. He spent 15 years in prison after being sentenced 9 times. He was a former promoter of prohibitions and a professional thief and a great actor. More than once, he was transferred from prison to the hospital after he pretended to be injured. Every time he did this, his goal was to get out of prison. After everything I told you about him, imagine that they named him El Anif. The last one who joined the gang was unknown. They named him El Walad. This is how the gang was formed. The leader, the engineer, the doctor, the financier, El Anif and El Walad. The strange thing is that they were all smart, and each one of them had a role to play. For example, the leader asked for plans for the streets around the bank. It makes sense that the doctor had plans for the streets, but El Anif had plans for the bank. When they asked him how he got the plans, he told them that he made a promise to keep his names and secret sources. That's why they stuck to the rules. Of course, the plan he had was 100% correct. After they saw the maps, they were able to determine where the safe was. The plan was to dig a hole and deliver them to the safe. They would sneak in and leave the hole. The whole operation would take place at night. Of course, they placed digging equipment inside the tunnels. They started digging from the roof of the safe, and they kept going towards the safe. The distance was 30 meters. The estimated time for the digging operation was 2 months. During this period, the engineer was working on something else, which was how to enter the safe without using the sensors there. Of course, there was a costly solution, but it was the best possible solution. It was to design special replacements that would hide the body's temperature. This way, the sensors wouldn't find the body's temperature. After the design was done, he bought a thermal camera and tested the replacement. Indeed, the experiment was a success. The problem was that the replacement was very heavy and hard. Therefore, they would enter the safe without noticing the sensors. But their movement inside the safe would be very difficult. Of course, he designed a complete replacement and they started training in it. It was impossible because the replacement was like the space astronaut's replacement. They wouldn't be able to move inside it or enter the bank. Here, the leader intervened and came up with a genius idea. But his idea was crazy in every way. He said, "Why don't we enter the bank's door, but run away from the tunnel?" The engineer explained the idea, and everyone agreed to it. In a little while, you'll know what happened. Now, let's go in order. When they agreed to enter the bank's door and run away from the tunnel, the idea of the replacement came up. Something new had to happen, and the leader didn't agree to it at the beginning of the plan, which was to have weapons with them when they enter the bank. The leader refused to have any weapons because he didn't want to harm anyone inside the bank. His goal was to bring his passion back to life so that he wouldn't kill anyone. The second reason was that if the plan failed and they had weapons, their crime would be doubled. But with the new update of the plan, he didn't have a solution, but to have weapons with them. That's why the leader asked the agent to bring weapons for the team. But it was a special request, and it's not a big deal. You'll know what I mean at the end of the video. Anyway, the agent brought the weapons that he asked for. As much as the leader was happy with the weapons, everyone agreed to have dinner. Here we reached the last stage, which is how to escape from the bank. How will they escape from the bank? As we said, they will escape through the tunnel. But the problem they faced was that if they decided to go down through the tunnel and exit from the exit of the bank, which is 160 meters away from the bank, the police will definitely catch them, because where do they want to get out of? That's why they had to think in a genius way that doesn't put the police in danger. Since the leader had planned everything, he told them that the best place to leave was one of the sewer openings. Everyone objected and told him that they will be exposed and this is expected. Here he told them the second part of the plan and told them that after they enter the safe and fill everything with a big bag, they will throw it into the tunnel that they dug. And after they finish it, they will leave the safe through this tunnel and escape into the safe. Here they will be waiting for the emergency boats. They will go in the opposite direction of the opening of the safe. They will go from there to a specific opening 200 meters away from the bank. This opening will have an old Volkswagen car parked on top of it. This car has an opening from below to enter the car. Of course, the sixth person in the gang who called the boy is responsible for waiting for them in the car, and he will drive them. Of course, they brought a car of the required type and made this opening in it, and they made it in the landlord's house that day. Everything was happening in front of the landlord's wife, and of course, he told them that she is trustworthy, and she would never tell anything. Of course, while they were working on the car, the engineer was working on a new device called the payphone. This device was a big pressure, whose mission was to break the lock of the small safes. As soon as they enter the safe, they will use this device to break the locks of the safes. Of course, the device was 100% successful, and it was able to break any lock in just 7 seconds. Anyway, the day of execution came, and the genius plan began. On January 13th, 2006, an old Volkswagen car parked in front of the bank's door. 4 people got out of it, wearing an official gray suit with black tags on their heads. The strange thing was that their hair was long and green. Of course, this suit was the idea of the leader. They put a Baroque hair color of green so that even the color of their hair would not be recognized. Of course, those who entered the bank were the leader, the doctor, the violent, and the financier. As for the engineer, he was inside the car, and he came out of the tunnel until he reached the safe's wall. He entered with a compressor, a drill, and tools to break the wall. As soon as he reached the signal and knew that his colleagues had entered the bank, he began to hit the wall to break it. The goal was to break the wall without breaking it. It was forbidden to break the wall until the leader allowed him to do so. Anyway, the 4 criminals who entered the bank controlled the bank and held everyone hostage. Their movements and behavior were strange in a way. They deluded everyone in the bank that they were dangerous, and at the same time gave the impression that they were afraid because their plan failed. Of course, after 15 minutes, the police filled the place and it was time for the next step. The financier took one of the hostages and went outside. He pretended in front of the police that he wanted to escape from the bank and go to their car that was outside. He was shocked by the police who filled the place and went back inside the bank because he was afraid. They held everyone hostage and started to delude everyone that their plan failed and that they needed a way to escape from the main door. There was a person who was very worried and caused a problem for the gang. He was the security guard who was in the surveillance room behind the cameras. He was telling the police about the gang's movements. The leader agreed with the hostages that they were afraid of the guard and forced him to leave the room. The leader ran to the security guard and told him that every extra minute that he stayed inside the room, he would be killed by the hostage. He took one of the hostages and attacked the room and put the gun on his head. The leader told the guard that if he left the room, he would be taken out of the bank and handed over to the police. The guard agreed because the hostage was afraid that he would agree. He left the room and took the leader's phone. He told him to let the police chief talk to him on his phone. He told him that he was stuck inside and that he wanted to leave, but he wanted to save his life. He left the room with one of the hostages and told the police the story. They told the police that the gang was afraid and knew that they would be exposed and stuck inside. During this time, the leader ran with the doctor and gave the engineer a signal to break the wall and enter the safe. The guard saw everything from the cameras, and if he opened the wall before the guard left the room, they would be exposed. The leader was aware of this. He told the engineer to wait and not to do anything until he gave the signal. After the guard was taken out and the cameras were broken, the police chief allowed him to break the wall. Of course, the wall was broken, and they opened the safe, and the engineer entered the safe and started breaking all the safes and stole all their contents. Of course, the ones who were stealing were the leader, the doctor, and the engineer. But the violent and the rich had to control the hostages and watch the police and earn time to complete the robbery. At this time, the violent left the main door and told the police to call the police chief and make him understand that he is asking him to call him indeed. The police chief called, and told him that we entered the bank to steal and leave, but we didn't catch up and you came before us. That's why we don't know what to do." Here, the police chief noticed something. The violent was visible from the bank window, and they were watching him. He was talking to the police chief, and he put his feet on the desk. He looked like he was not afraid at all. Here, they asked the police chief if he had any evidence. The violent told him that he was released from the new prison, and he wouldn't have any problem if he went back there. But all they wanted was that no hostage would be harmed, and the story would end well. The police chief agreed, and gave him an hour. During this hour, the violent went to the leader to see if the plan was going well or not. He was shocked that the three of them emptied half of the safe and filled it with bags. He was very happy. He asked them how much time they needed, and they told him that they needed an hour, and everything would be ready. Here, they waited until the first hour passed. The police chief called again and told him that they were very sorry. They wanted a safe way to say goodbye, but before that, they wanted to apologize for the hostages. They told him that they wanted to do something good, and that they wanted him to bring a pizza for them and the hostages. They wanted to eat together and then leave the bank and say goodbye to the hostages. He told them that they couldn't do that, so they had to end their lives and the hostages' lives with them. Of course, the police chief agreed, and he wanted to free his legal responsibility from what was happening. Since he agreed to the violent Ed's condition, to bring them a pizza from a specific place 40 minutes away from the bank means that they gained an additional 40 minutes. Indeed, the police chief agreed, and the young men inside the bank were doing their job. Here, the doctor came out of the safe and told the violent and the hostages that they were done, and it was time to leave. The hostages' asked the hostages to lie down on the floor, and they were watching them from above. He told them that anyone who moves will be shot immediately. Meanwhile, they slowly moved inside the safe. The doctor and the engineer were waiting for a while to receive all the stolen goods. The chief, the agent, and the violent started throwing the stolen goods bags, and the doctor and the engineer were putting them inside the rubber boats. When they were done, they put a big time bomb on the safe's door, and next to it, they put a piece of red cloth on the floor and put the weapons that were with them. After that, they got out of the car and ran away. They arrived at the police station where the boy was waiting for them. They got out of the car and entered the car with the stolen goods. The car drove away and went to the agent's house. They lined up inside the garage and entered the house immediately and turned on the TV to see what was happening with the police. The police were still outside and they broke into the bank. The gang members stole and came back to the house, and the police were still outside. After 2 hours of their escape, the chief decided to break into the bank. Don't be surprised that the gang disappeared. They have no trace. Why is it funny that the chief broke into the bank after calling the agent 33 times? If I were to answer him, I would say it's easy, but he broke into the bank because he was bored. The plan worked 100%. They split the money between them, and each of them went his own way. Their agreement was that they would never meet again for any reason. While they were splitting the money, the police were solving the problem of the bomb that was on the safe door. The surprise was that the bomb was just a game, and the goal was to get more time. Now, what's amazing about the story is the weapons they left in the bank. These weapons were just games. Even with this, their matters were calculated. Because if the plan failed and they were arrested, the weapons they had were just games. Therefore, they would not be prosecuted. The chief calculated all the details. As I told you, the plan worked, and each of them returned to their normal life. However, the agent had a strange story. Once upon a time, the agent came home and discovered that his wife took 3 bags of money valued at $100,000. When she asked him why he did this, he told her that it was part of the plan, and that he needed some money to buy them. The sources confirmed that this is what happened. This is how his wife told him. Imagine that he went crazy and he was killed with her. She threatened him that she would complain and reveal the plan if he kept screaming. She was silent and left the house and took all the remaining money and hid it somewhere else. When he returned home, he saw his wife waiting for him on the fire. He was killed with her, and she told him that he was doing this because he was rich and wanted to emigrate. She told him that she would not allow him to do this. The next day, as soon as the light came on, she withdrew herself and went to the police station and told him everything. He was arrested by the agent, the leader, the engineer, and the violent. As for the doctor and the boy, no one knows anything about them because they left the country. Even the money that was stolen until today, no one knows its value. All sources confirm that the gang did not return anything that was stolen. The bank was the one who was harmed in the theft and compensated all the clients. The gang was tried with different sentences ranging from 9 years to 15 years. However, none of them remained in prison for more than 3 years. Why? Because their popularity grew and everyone was asking them to leave. More than one lawyer defended them, and more than one association asked them to leave. In the end, they left the prison, and the story became unthinkable. Imagine that after they left, their story became a comedy and action movie. They are the heroes. The movie made a lot of noise and achieved a great success. The gang, as an apology, allocated 30% of the profits to the bank that was harmed because of them, so that their story would be recorded as the smartest theft in human history, and they called it the theft of the century. This was our story for today. I hope you liked it. Tell me what you think. After all that happened, did Arawak's leader regain his passion for life, or is he still bored? I am Abu Al-Yusha. Goodbye, and see you in a new video. I am Abu Al-Yusha. Goodbye and see you in a new video.